Summer is supposed to be the safest season. Long days, warm nights, grilling in the backyard, kids running through sprinklers, friends sitting around a fire while the sun disappears behind the trees. But there is something about summer nights that people don't talk about. When the windows are open, when the neighborhood gets quiet, and when you're standing alone in your backyard at 2 a.m, you realize just how much darkness can hide. Tonight, we're going into 4 disturbing backyard horror stories. Some involve strangers. Some involve things that shouldn't have been there. And one of them may make you think twice before stepping outside after midnight. So turn off the lights, lock the back door, and if you hear something moving outside, whatever you do, don't assume it's an animal. The first story takes place during the middle of July. A man we'll call Daniel had recently moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio. It was one of those neighborhoods with nearly identical houses, perfectly cut lawns, wooden fences, and backyards separated by just enough distance to give everyone the illusion of privacy. Daniel lived alone, and during the summer, he spent most evenings outside. He had a small fire pit in the backyard, a cheap patio set, and a string of lights hanging along the fence. Nothing unusual. One Friday night, around 11:30 p.m., Daniel was sitting outside drinking a beer and scrolling through his phone. The neighborhood was almost completely silent. Then he heard something, a faint metallic sound. He looked toward the wooden fence behind him. Nothing. A few seconds later, Daniel assumed it was probably a raccoon. He went back to his phone. Then he heard a voice, very quietly, from the other side of the fence. "Hey!" Daniel froze. He looked toward the fence. "Hello?" No answer. He stood up. "Everything okay?" Silence. Then, "Can you help me?" The voice sounded like a man. Daniel walked closer to the fence. "What's wrong?" The stranger didn't answer. Instead, Daniel heard footsteps moving slowly through the grass on the other side. Then the voice came again. "I think I'm lost." That immediately made Daniel uncomfortable. The neighborhood wasn't large. There was a street running behind the houses, but there was no reason for someone to be standing inside the yards at midnight. Daniel stepped backward. "There's a sidewalk out front," he said. "You should go around." Nothing. Then he heard something scrape against the wooden fence. Daniel looked down. A pair of fingers appeared underneath the gap between the fence boards. He jumped backward. The fingers slowly curled around the bottom edge, then disappeared. Daniel ran inside. He locked the back door, then every window. For the next 20 minutes, he watched the backyard through the kitchen blinds. Nothing moved. Eventually, he convinced himself that whoever was had left. He went upstairs. But before going to bed, he checked the security camera on his phone. His backyard camera covered almost the entire yard. Daniel rewound the footage. At 11:34 p.m., nothing. 11:35, nothing. 11:36, nothing. Then he noticed something. At the very edge of the camera's view, behind the fence, a shadow moved. Daniel paused the video. He zoomed in. It wasn't an animal. It was a person. Someone had been standing behind the fence for nearly 15 minutes, just standing there, watching his backyard. Daniel kept watching. Then the figure slowly moved toward the fence and stopped directly behind the section where Daniel had been sitting. Daniel checked the timestamp. 11:42 p.m. That was when he remembered something. The voice had said, "I think I'm lost." But the person on the camera had never been walking. They had been standing there the entire time. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he went outside. There were muddy footprints behind the fence. They led from the alley straight toward his backyard and stopped at the fence. There were no footprints going back. The second story happened to a family in Pennsylvania. They had 2 children, ages 6 and 9. And that summer, the father built a wooden swing set in their backyard. The kids loved it. Every evening after dinner, they would go outside and play until it got dark. One night, around 9 p.m., the mother looked through the kitchen window. The swing set was moving. She assumed one of the kids was still outside. She opened the back door. "Guys, time to come inside." No answer. She stepped onto the patio. "Come on." It's getting late." The swing continued moving, back and forth, back and forth. The mother walked toward it. Then she noticed something strange. Only one swing was moving. The other was completely still. She grabbed the moving swing and stopped it. Then she looked around. Her children were nowhere in the backyard. She called their names. Nothing. Then she heard giggling. From behind the shed, she walked over. Both children were there. They were playing with a flashlight. "Why didn't you answer me?" The older child looked confused. "We did." "No, you didn't." "Yes, Mom. We were calling you." The mother looked toward the swing set. "What were you calling me about?" The boy pointed toward the house. "We thought you were standing by the swing." The mother felt a chill. "What?" "You were there," he said. "By the swing." The mother stared at him. "I was inside." The boy shook his head. "No, you were wearing your white shirt." His sister suddenly interrupted. "She told us not to tell Dad." The mother crouched down. "Who told you that?" The little girl pointed toward the swing. Her. The mother looked at the swing. Nothing was there. She immediately took both children inside. That night, the father checked the backyard. Nothing. The next morning, he noticed something carved into the wooden support of the swing set. 3 words. He assumed the kids had written it, until he noticed the carving was too high for either child to reach. He erased it. A few days later, another message appeared, this time on the side of the shed. The parents eventually installed a camera. For several nights, nothing happened. Then, at 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday morning, the camera detected movement. The swing began moving. Slowly. There was no wind. The father watched the footage the next morning. At first, he thought the camera was malfunctioning. Then, he noticed something standing behind the swing. A dark figure. Small, almost child-sized. The figure remained completely still for nearly a minute. Then it stepped backward and disappeared behind the swing set. The father checked every camera. Nothing. He went outside. There were no footprints, but the swing was still moving. The family removed the swing set the following weekend. And according to the mother, the strangest part wasn't what happened afterward. It was what her daughter said while they were carrying it away. She looked toward the empty backyard and whispered, "Now she has nowhere to sit." The third story is less supernatural, and somehow that's what makes it worse. A couple in North Carolina bought their first house in the summer. The property had a large backyard surrounded by trees. There was also an old storage shed near the back fence. The shed was in terrible condition. The couple barely used it. A few weeks after moving in, they began noticing strange things. Food disappearing, small tools going missing, and sometimes the back door would be unlocked in the morning. They blamed each other. Then they blamed raccoons. Until one Saturday afternoon, the husband found an empty water bottle inside the shed. He knew it wasn't his. He threw it away. The next morning, there were 2 more. Then a blanket appeared. Then an old backpack. The couple called the police. An officer searched the shed. Nothing. The officer told them it was probably kids messing around. The couple installed motion sensor lights. For a while, everything stopped. Then one night, around 1 a.m., the lights turned on. The husband looked outside. Nothing. He waited. The lights shut off. 5 minutes later, they turned on again. This time, he grabbed a flashlight. He went outside. His wife told him not to. He ignored her. He walked toward the shed. The door was slightly open. He pushed it. The inside was dark. "Hello?" Nothing. He shined the flashlight around. Old boxes, gardening equipment, cobwebs, nothing else. Then he noticed the floor. There were fresh footprints, bare feet. They led from the shed toward the house. The husband followed them. They stopped directly beneath the kitchen window. He went back inside. The police returned. This time, they searched the entire property. They found something hidden underneath the shed, a small crawl space. Inside were blankets, food wrappers, bottled water, and photographs. Photographs of the couple. Some were taken through their windows. One showed the husband sleeping. Another showed the wife sitting on the couch. The newest photograph had been taken only 2 days earlier. It showed the couple standing in their backyard. The officer looked at it, then looked at the couple. Do you know who took this? They didn't. The police searched the surrounding area, but couldn't find anyone. The couple installed cameras everywhere. 3 days later, one camera captured a person entering the backyard at 3:08 a.m. The figure walked directly toward the shed, then stopped. They looked directly into the camera and smiled. The couple moved out 2 weeks later. But here's the part that still bothers them. 6 months later, the husband received a message from an unknown number. There was no text, just one photograph. It was a picture of their new house, taken from across the street. And underneath it were 4 words. You left the shed. The final story happened during a family vacation in rural Michigan. And unlike the others, there was never a clear explanation. A woman named Rachel rented an old vacation house with her husband and 2 friends. The property was surrounded by trees. There were no close neighbors, no street lights, no traffic, just forest. During the day, it was beautiful. At night, it was completely black. On their second evening, everyone was sitting around a fire in the backyard. They were talking, laughing, drinking. Around midnight, Rachel's husband went inside to get more drinks. Rachel stayed by the fire. Then she heard something behind her, a voice, very quietly. Rachel. She turned around. Nobody was there. She assumed one of her friends had called her. What? Her friend looked confused. I didn't say anything. Rachel laughed nervously. Then she heard it again. Rachel. This time, it sounded closer. She stood up. Very funny. Nobody answered. Her husband came outside. What's wrong? I thought someone called my name. He looked toward the trees. Probably an animal. They laughed it off. 10 minutes later, everyone went inside. Rachel was the last person to enter. As she closed the back door, she heard a voice from the yard. Her own voice. Wait! Rachel froze. She slowly looked outside. The backyard was empty. Then the voice came again. Rachel? It sounded exactly like her. She locked the door. The next morning, she told everyone what happened. Her friends laughed, until one of them said something. I heard it too. Rachel looked at him. When? After you went inside. He hesitated. It sounded like you were standing near the fire. The group became quiet. That evening, nobody wanted to sit outside. They ate dinner inside, then watched television. Around 11:40 p.m., they heard footsteps on the back porch. Slow footsteps. One step, then another, then another. Everyone stopped talking. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Nobody moved. Then came 3 knocks. Rachel's husband stood up. Who's there? Silence. He looked through the window. Nobody. Then a voice whispered, Let me in. Rachel immediately grabbed his arm. Don't. The voice came again. This time, it was her husband's voice. Let me in. Everyone in the room froze. Rachel looked at her husband. He was standing beside her. The voice outside repeated itself. Let me in. Then it changed. Rachel's voice. Please. Then her friend's voice. Open the door. Then another friend's voice. And another. It kept changing. Like something outside was trying different voices. Nobody answered. For nearly 10 minutes. The voices continued. Then suddenly, silence. They waited. Nothing. Eventually, they went to bed. The next morning, the back porch was empty. There were no footprints. No damage. Nothing. They began packing. But before leaving, Rachel noticed something near the fire pit. A piece of paper. She picked it up. There was writing on it. 3 words. I heard you. Rachel didn't understand. Until her husband remembered something. The night before, after hearing the voice say, Let me in, he had whispered, Who's there? The thing outside had heard him, and apparently it had been waiting for him to speak. They left immediately. Years later, Rachel said she never stayed in another isolated vacation house. But the strangest part happened months after the trip. She was at home. It was summer. She was sitting in her backyard with her husband. Everything was normal until she heard a voice from behind the fence. Her husband's voice. "Rachel." She turned around. Her husband was sitting right beside her. The voice came again, this time from farther away. "Rachel." She stood up. Her husband grabbed her hand. Neither of them spoke. Then, from somewhere beyond the fence, came a final whisper. "I know you're there. Maybe there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for every story you've heard tonight. Maybe the first man was simply a trespasser. Maybe the swing was moved by the wind. Maybe someone really was hiding inside that shed. And maybe the final story was nothing more than a strange coincidence. But that's the problem with the dark. You can explain what you see. You can explain what you hear. But sometimes, you can't explain why something was there in the first place. So, tonight, when you step outside, and you hear a branch snap behind you, don't immediately assume it's a raccoon. Don't assume it's your neighbor. And if you hear someone quietly call your name from the darkness, make absolutely sure you know who's speaking before you answer. Because sometimes, the thing calling you isn't the thing you think it is. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more unsettling horror stories. And tell me in the comments, what's the creepiest thing you've ever heard coming from your backyard at night? Until next time, keep the lights on. And whatever you hear outside, don't answer.